There we go. There we are. Okay, so everybody can see that, correct? Okay, great. Thank you all for joining us. As we were introduced, I'm Dr. Crissa Levin, and I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Jennifer Grewe, and we co-direct the Factotum Lab in the Psychology Department, which is a lab specifically for undergraduate students, which includes only undergraduate students. We generally work with about 10 to 15 undergraduate students each semester, with many students staying with us a year or more, usually about 5 students staying with us only 1 semester. We designed the lab in such a way that when they work in groups, the students who stay on a year or more are able to design and run their own study from start to finish, ending in a conference presentation. The students who are with us only a semester do an intensive lit search and write a lit review that the next semester's longer committed students will use to give them a running start for their project. We wouldn't be able to do any of this without the use of a project management software to guide the work of our students and act as an almost like a virtual classroom, because we start a new study every single semester with these students. So from the work in our lab, we know that research mentorship can be incredibly rewarding, but also incredibly time consuming. And since you're here, I'm guessing that you either already know that or you're better at predicting it than I am. And I know that for our lab, the time ends up such that it would honestly be faster if we kind of just did all the work ourselves. Instead of taught our students how to do the work. But of course, that's super not the point. And that's not our goal. And it's not the goal of universities in general. Our goal is to train scientists. We want to make students love science, get engaged in science, learn about the process. And so it's going to take longer. It's going to be intensive work. And it's so important and so meaningful, yet so time consuming. So today we're going to talk about how project management software can be used to help optimize that time in research mentorship settings so that the time that you spend with your students can be spent on things that only you can do, things that are done between only you as a faculty member or as a person that's mentoring research that can't be pushed to online sections, to things like tutorials or online modules. Basically, we'll walk through how to make a project management system work like a flexible and reusable classroom for learning how to do different types of major sets of tasks that are regularly done in your lab, so that both the student has a touchstone of where to check back for questions and checklists, so that you can reserve your time for high level and meaningful tasks or the relationship building interactions of the lab. By the time we end this talk, we want you to be able to walk out of here envisioning how you can set up a project management software or a PMS to work for your own lab or a research endeavor that you're working with. So be sure to ask questions at the end or intermittently to make sure that we're meeting those goals for you and making sure it can work for whatever you're doing in your lab. Okay, so when you look at every individual project in your lab, it's easy to start with how they're different. But of course, the content is really the only thing that changes quite a bit. There's so many reusable instances within a study. And maybe there's some minor tweaks here and there that might have choice points. Like in our lab, it comes up a lot whether or not we're using deception and therefore need a debriefing. So the scaffolding of these things is really important, but we can reuse the repetitive and potentially boring portion of the mentoring within the lab. That can be made reusable. And if there's one central take home of this entire talk, it's this, that it's best to search for the reusable pieces of mentoring that do not differ between projects. That's the best use of using these PMS systems. We have no advice to give on the individualized pieces, or at least not in this talk. The way that you mentor your students is really up to you. But for the rest, scaffold, build up and build out, and do that in the ways that we'll show. But basically think about what can be reused, what elements are universal, because the thing about scaffolding, the repetitive tasks that everyone just simply needs to know to build out a research study or a lit review into a project management system, is that it allows you to spend all of your time on individualized questions, the things that people don't understand, or on questions that are only specific to that content or the one thing that matters to this particular study, or on building the relationships, on the things that keep people motivated, not the stuff they need to learn, but the things that actually matter about keeping students engaged for that project or for that team. Let's see. Okay. So now when you look at an individual project in your lab, it's easy to start with, oh no, I already did that. Yeah, it's easy to start with how they're different, but the building blocks are the same. Oh, did I already do this part of the time? I did. So I skipped my notes from the last one. So let me go back and just say the notes from slide. No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I just haven't moved on yet. Okay, for this section of this session, we're going to be here a while on what to look for in a PMS. We're going to talk about all of the different features that you might look for in a PMS and why they might be beneficial from our experience in how we use these programs. We're going to only really talk about ClickUp as the one example, but that doesn't mean that we're here to just say ClickUp is the thing you should use. There's just no way that we think it's useful to like adequately cover all of the different PMS systems. So we're going to talk using ClickUp as kind of a foundational backdrop for that, but we'll talk about the types of things that we think are useful to look at as features, and then just use ClickUp as that example. So let's go through each of these individually and talk about why we think they are important. First up, by far the most important thing that we think is useful to look for in a PMS is templates. A template is like a pre-built task list. So it's where you can basically build a giant task list and then reassign it either to new people or to new groups of people all at once without having to touch anything. You can touch the due dates if you want to, but you don't have to do anything. And each task can have dependencies. Each task can have, all of them do, not can, but generally will have individual descriptions, all sorts of things like that. And they're just going to stay the same. And then you just go ahead and assign them to whomever you want. What we mean by a template is a mix between a checklist and an online course. Our template gives the students basically a bird's eye view of where they're going to go the second that we add them, all the way through to whenever this project is completed. This also has the benefit of kind of easing some anxiety. I know this might be less important for graduate students who have often done, like they have some idea where they're going, but for undergraduate students who are doing these very new things when they're joining research, they often really don't even have a clue what kind of thing they're going to get into. And they also might not know things that they don't know. So like they think they know what a peer-reviewed study is, but they maybe don't really, or they think they know how to use Google Scholar, but then they kind of contact you saying, well, I couldn't find anything because it was all behind a paywall. So having all of that right up front, they can skip around as they want and see where they're going. And that alleviates so much anxiety all right away. And it allows wiggle room for kind of those conference weeks or for those heavy grading weeks when we just kind of can't attend to students who really need our help because they're just at a lull and they really want to be moving on. They can move on without us because they know what's next. They know what's coming. There's always something they can do without us answering a question because there's always something without a dependency that's in the future. So inside each item in the task list is going to be detail, and we err on the side of too much detail. And there's a couple reasons for this. One is to just get them going, make sure that we don't assume that students kind of know too much. We err on the side of like making sure that students are allowed to kind of have that lack of knowledge that they may not know they don't know. But also there's this other idea that's very useful, which is that every project management system I've ever seen, but certainly ClickUp, is searchable. So maybe 10 tasks later, they're coming up and saying like, I just have no idea what to do right now. They can just search the entire system with whatever search terms come to mind. Maybe they try a couple, and then all of a sudden they see this really kind of detailed explanation of what they can do that's related to this future task. So we give a lot of detail. We also give tutorials. And this is where we say really strongly, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. Tutorials already exist. This is not where we suggest spending your time, but of course you do you. The library at USU is a fantastic resource for this. And when we get to the example portion, I'll show you some of the ideas of what the library has in case you're not already familiar with that. But one thing that I've found is that it's not just our library. And as long as you're linking externally, why not use the great World Wide Web and all of the other fantastic resources of all of the other fantastic schools? So for example, one of the things that I often do when I'm searching for tutorials on how to do things inside of these task lists is that I'll search the word tutorial, I'll search for whatever it is I'm looking for, and I'll search .edu. And that already starts to get elimination of a lot of the things that I would try to eliminate quickly for things like accuracy and credibility thresholds. So that's really useful to find, like, all of the schools have kind of done this for you, and they usually do it in these small enough chunks that it's useful. So like 1 to 3 minute videos. One last thing here is talking about like tasks, subtasks, and even new templates within your template. So some tasks are large enough for a subtask. One example that we use there is Zotero. We ask all of our students to use the citation manager Zotero. And when they're setting this up, we say, task 1, watch UCLA's click-through tutorial on what Zotero is and how you would engage with it. Step 2, download it. Step 3, download the Word integration for it. So that's 3 different tasks. But there's this main task that already just introduces them to how we use it in the lab. Here's how you're going to form your group so that all of you work on the same project that shares it. So that's how you would use, or how we use, subtasks. But sometimes you get to these things that are kind of too big. And so we make multiple subtasks, or new templates, I mean. So we have inside of the main new study template, we have consider submitting a presentation. In the lit review, it says consider submitting to like USU's Research Week, for example. In our kind of year-long study, we have a whole list of presentations, like consider everything that we've ever thought was useful for our lab. But if they consider it and say, why I think I will, then all of a sudden, this is a little bit too big for subtasks. So we have a whole new template for if they decide to do either a poster or an oral presentation. And if they let us know that they'd like to do that, we'll just assign a new template to them for that. Okay, let's see here.
Awesome. I can talk about this one.
Yes.
One other thing I was going to mention about using tutorials and templates is that I know for me as an instructor and somebody who's mentored students for many years in a research process, some of that explaining and the repetitiveness with the explaining of things like, for example, teaching a student how to do a literature review. I found myself getting some burnout, having to explain that over and over again. By the 100th student you're explaining and teaching how to do a literature review, I mean, it's just like, oh, I'm done, you know? And so being able to utilize those also provides me with more bandwidth to be able to help and assist more students and have more patience in that process. Some other things that we would recommend that you look in a project management system is affordability. We started off using a free version of ClickUp. It was, and we eventually kind of outgrew the free version, but it was possible for us to use this free version. They allowed us to have the amount of students that we needed on the free version. We just didn't have the data storage. And so we solved that problem in a different way where we utilized our USU data storage box. And we would just link, we had all those direct links to particular box file, and we would have the students link to that particular storage. So that challenge, we kind of found a different way to sort of overcome it. Now, we did on occasion have a student forget, and they would start loading files onto the ClickUp, and it was a little bit labor intensive to go through and have to delete those files. But as long as the students remembered to load their files in box and just link, it was fine, and it was an affordable way to go. It was also, so when we did decide to switch to a paid version of the ClickUp, it was something that, besides utilizing within our lab, we were able to use those templates and those checklists that the ClickUp, the project management system, provides us in other capacities. And for me, who, like, I tend to be somebody who says, what am I getting? What is this worth? What's the value? I want something that, has some value, to be able to utilize it for many different purposes besides just the students in my lab. For example, when we were working with honor students and they were going through some of the same process to starting their honors projects, we could utilize those same templates. The sharing resources with colleagues. We had colleagues come to us and say, hey, how are you managing this particular project? Or how are you managing to have this number of students in your lab? I find, mentoring one student in a research process is overwhelming. We are able to share those templates and that project management system information and share with colleagues, and that's another good way to utilize kind of what we're paying for. Crissa, could you move to the next slide? We also would recommend looking for one that provides you with the ability to tag and some in-program communication. We found that this is really a great aspect of the ClickUp, that students can go in and they can tag each other, or they can tag one of us. I know that I often use my email as my to-do list, which is not very efficient. But being able to, see that I've been tagged in something by a student, that way it saves time. The student doesn't have to send me an additional email and ask me to look at their work. It just, I'm notified of that. They can, it eliminates an extra layer in that communication process that doesn't really need to be there, and makes things a little bit more efficient in terms of communication. It's also nice to have that paper trail. I know that, again, I use my email often as my paper trail, but having a project management system that has those kinds of in-house communication, you can look back and say, okay, well, who was assigned this particular task? Which, speaking of that level, it helps in terms of whether, if in case you forgot something, and looking back and seeing who was supposed to follow through. And something else to look for in our project management software is that accountability, which I think is on the next slide, Crissa. So the accountability piece is really pretty critical. And it's not just for the students. It does work really well with the students, where they're able to tag each other. We can see, okay, so-and-so has gotten this many things marked off their list, but somebody else is just in the first couple steps on their list. And so being able to have that written in a written form, it really keeps the students accountable. It also keeps me accountable. When they've tagged me in something and they can come back and they say, Dr. Grewe, you said we tagged you and you said you were going to look at this within a reasonable amount of time, I can kind of say, oh, you know what, you're right. I am responsible for that, and I need to actually follow through on the things that I have committed to. It helps to train some kind of time management with the students. They can see usually the amount of work that goes into each of those tasks, and they can kind of get a better estimate of how much time they're going to need to spend on each of those processes. And then it allows them to have some kind of shared time on deadlines. And so if they're working and collaborating together on a project, it might not be just one student, it might be multiple students and working on that project, and they're kind of depending on each other and establishing kind of more of those, getting a feel for having colleagues and working with colleagues in that sort of environment. Crissa, I'll let you talk about the next few. I know we're running short on time.
Yeah, so I'll talk about this one just pretty quickly. The last thing So that's it that we would look for in a program. But one thing that we want to talk about too is just how project management systems or using them as kind of courses might change your workflow. And really, it's not something that's particularly new to anybody. It's just this idea that working a lot today saves a lot tomorrow. So obviously, we all have encountered these kinds of things. Like if you've ever prepped an online class, it's true there too. So we know this. It's just particularly true here. And we have kind of a story to model how true this is, where the first semester that we were using a PMS, we had a project that was coming due where we were about to submit the IRB. And we had a student who was like, it's asking me to enter the date of my city certification. What's that? And it was like, oh no, I've forgotten to tell the student that that exists in the world. And it happened to be one of our particularly busy students with like work and a family. And so it was weeks that the entire project was just waiting for this one student. She was very motivated, but she didn't have the time. And so that was entirely my fault from not having like thought through every step in advance. So of course we all want to have all the time in the world. It's not always going to happen that way. So there's something to be said for like giving yourself some grace and building the boat in the water. But there's also like this ability too, that we are constantly upgrading our boat in the water. That's something that we do all the time in various ways that I'm not going to get into too much because of time. So, but again, it's just this idea that the more you prepare in advance, the less you will miss, the less time you'll have to spend answering questions that could be better answered by simple tutorials that have already done it better than you could. And instead spending time with your students about things that are just specific to their project, specific to things that only you can answer. So now let's talk about doing a quick example. And while I go through this, well, before we do, first I'd like to ask, what questions do people have based on just the talk that we've given so far? And then we will go through an example of a lit review template that we've built. So
we might be out of time because I think
I thought we had till 35.
Oh, I don't know. Brian?
I believe it is until 2:35.
Okay, 2:35. Oh, okay, we're totally fine. I'm sorry.
I know the next one starts at 2:45, so there's at least
perfect.
a 10-minute buffer. So
don't mean to cause any panic.
Good. Go ahead, Martha.
Yes, and perhaps some of these features that you're going to show might answer my question, but so far it sounds like a lot of what you've described could actually be done within a Canvas course. So I'm kind of wondering what the pros and cons are. And I have many students that do projects. So I'm really interested in this, but currently I house it within a Canvas course. So that's my question. What's the advantage of using this as compared to housing it within a Canvas course?
That's
even if the Canvas course has to be specially made. I saw Elisa's in the meeting, and she's the one that's always made my special Canvas courses for my project class.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I actually was wondering if somebody was going to ask that today, because I think that the nuts and bolts absolutely can be the same. One of the things that I particularly prefer is giving the students a lot more control. So it gives them, like we ask our students to make all their own deadlines. We ask them to tag us, not just in conversations, but also in due dates, to create new tasks as they're needed. So things like that they're just not really available in Canvas. And it's a lot more flexible in different ways, but that flexibility isn't always used or necessary, right? So it's like, are you just asking for more things that you don't need because they're shiny? And to some degree, like, yes, all right, like shiny things. But there is like, those are the parts that we really use. It's like allowing the students a lot more control and a lot more kind of interactivity between projects. You could do some of the things that we do, certainly by making sections, for example, different things like that. But I think this makes it simpler and saves us time in some regards. Other questions?
I have a quick comment.
Sure.
Yeah, we use a project management system doing something totally different, right? And one of the flexible things that I've noticed and that I described to my new students is that everything is a container and a layer. So they're really, really flexible. You work at it backwards, like this is your objective. You find the few tools that you need to make that happen. And then I've actually had a student after they'd graduated and got a real job come back and say that their experience using project management software, what they learned just doing what we did here, actually gave them a little step up. They were used to using project management software when they got in the real world. Okay, that's my comment.
Ryan, that's awesome. And something I actually had not thought about that. So I'm going to start telling my students that.
Yeah, I think I agree. That's really useful. And I think there is like, I think there's so much there's a lot of layers of how it's helpful in learning, I think, with teaching accountability, teaching how things work in the real world in a lot of different ways. So that's a really good example of it. So now I'll start walking through this lit review template, and I would like to very much invite people to ask questions as we go, to interrupt, because we're not headed to a specific point. So one thing I'd like to point out in this is, and let me see if I can kind of move you guys to this side, is this starts out with this in progress task, which moves it to the top. And I did this on purpose because this way it puts the goals of the entire semester instructions at the beginning. It teaches students what the objectives are of writing a lit review, and not just writing one, but for our lab, how it's going to be used, what you want to be thinking about when writing a lit review, and some of the things you want to be focusing on. And of course, there's like some bolding to get this very long thing being attended to. There's some kind of quick tips. And then over here, we have a document attached to like a quick reference guide to APA style. And then students who are only writing a lit review for our lab are generally doing it for a credit in the psychology department. So we talk very quickly at the end here, not very quickly, but very precisely about what they need to be turning in and when, and then have a couple examples. And the reason that we keep that in progress is so that's at the top and they can refer to it at any time in the semester. Moving along here, we've got a couple things that I want to point out. We have all of these tutorials, and even a couple of these should say tutorial at the beginning. That just kind of got left behind. And all of these have really useful things in them. So like tutorial on using Google Scholar. If we look in here, it's just a quick review of like why you would use it, when you would use it. And then we go straight into, if you press play, which is already in here, you can make it full screen, you can watch it inside, you can make it a new window. And I'll mute this as soon as I start it. You can see that this is something made by our library at USU. And it's only, look at this, under a minute. And it tells students how to set up their individual Google Scholar to kind of get past the paywall and everything else. So they're supposed to be doing all of these tutorials, getting to weekly hours in the first 2 weeks of the semester. Everything from what plagiarism actually means in scientific writing, what a lit review actually is with some examples. Then we have the Zotero that I talked about, where we've got some subtasks in here, right? So we can see if we go down here, we have these downloading Zotero using UCLA's interactive tutorial. And one thing that I do is I have these exclamation points as this key. This is a hint to myself and to Jen. This isn't for the students. So at the time that I assign a new project, a new template to students, I actually go in and assign things, assign new names. So it's not just one student that needs to do downloading. It's one per student that gets this template. So if there's a team that all gets assigned the same template, then I want, Shelly to do this, and I want Kelsey to do this. Like I want all the people to do this individually. So I want to make multiple tasks, and then I'll erase those exclamation points after I've done that. Any questions so far as we walk through this? Okay, I'll keep moving, but please interrupt me. Some of the other things that I want to point out here, one of my favorite tutorials that's come in the most handy is coming up with new search terms. This is something in our library, well, several things. And so we get this throughout the semester. I'm sure many other people who work with undergraduates doing lit reviews do. They say like, I'm stuck. There's no more research. I ran out. I've read all the things. And so all you have to do, instead of spending a half hour with this student talking through the same thing, you say, okay, go ahead and find the tutorial on coming up with new search terms. And they probably didn't really pay attention the first time because it's not very interesting until you're in the middle and stuck. And then we've got a handful of different things from the USU library on narrowing or broadening your search, on using related terms to narrow your search, on like subject terms versus keywords, all of these things. And then what you can say is basically, please go through this. And if you're still stuck, let's meet after lab, or let's set up a meeting, that type of thing. And really it's only from here down that's actually writing the lit review. But all of those things set them up for success and set them up for searching. And so they're really prepared with all of these things that are the common questions. Any questions?
One other thing I forgot to mention earlier, we have the students often within the frame of the semester come up with their own due dates so that they can look at their own schedules and they can kind of match up and see, when are you going to have time to do this and that. There are some due dates that we have on there that are just kind of typical, like October and February, consider presenting at USU, the research symposium week, research week. And so we do have those in there, but for the most part, the students are setting their own due dates when it's kind of an independent outside of class project.
Well, I think we have 1 minute left. Any 1 minute comments or questions? Well, thanks so much.
Thank you all for being here and listening.
Okay, one quick question. If a student does one of these to-do things, are they taken off the list and put somewhere else?
No, so they basically have the control, which is one of the things I like it. So if a student completes this tutorial, then what they will do is they will assign it like to me. So say that I assign it to Jen. Jen is going to hit complete over here and she's going to change it to complete, and then it'll just move on to the next thing. And then you can kind of decide how you want to search, whether you want to search completed or not. But she'll always be in her given space. So for example, if we look down at our studies, we can see like bias in student evaluations. They only have a couple things left to do. They're not going to go away. So if I assign one of the students, like if I wanted to assign Audrey this, she's still going to be in the bias and evaluations project area, but she doesn't have anything left to do because the study's almost done. They've already done their presentations. They've done their data analysis, even though it's not checked off. That sort of thing.
But they
Does
can
that make
still
sense?
go back and, I mean, they can look at things that they've completed. They can go back and kind of check out things that they've already clicked off their list.
So there, I'm sorry, there is another label of completed.
There is. So if I wanted to filter for, let's see, status is closed.
Oh, closed.
And you can
And
see,
you can see all the things that they've closed.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So I think we're all done, but thank you so much for coming and listening. And please feel free to reach out to both of us at any time if you're interested or have more questions.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.